100.
No, not for us. Because they are
Oh, sorry.
It's okay to go.
You take my original. Sorry, I always forget. But normally 10 don't show up. If all 100 showed up, usually every week I have like 10 extra. Oh, well, they're selling them on street corners or something. I don't know. But no, because normally, like, I just handed him 2 piles from last week and the week before that because there's usually so many left over. So I was actually thinking I'm cutting back on how many, but weird if all of a sudden, maybe there's extras lying around somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any extra handouts? I made 100, and usually some people don't show up, so there should be some extras floating around. If anybody has them, please give it to Amanda. Anybody got extras? Okay. Oh, good. Thank you very much. Huh? That doesn't matter. Okay, before we get started, hello, 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 hello. I don't know if it helps if I put it higher. Hello, hello, hello. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention this was the thing I brought up last time, that you can just kind of make up words if you want. Now, some people would say that this is a rule-governed type of thing, but it's also could just be seen as analogy because we have words that you can put on in front of, we have words you can put able after, and we think of put down as kind of like a word. So it's not a problem to, by analogy, to just say unputdownable or to say putdownable. You know, we can be creative with language. It's not a fixed system. It's something that we can always, it's human behavior, so it's something we can always play with. There are, of course, you know, conventions, but I just want to, let's see. So like in terms of the conventions, I received this ad today, and you'll notice it says 2 doors fridge. Wait, oops, this wire is going to kill me one of these days. It says like 2 doors fridge, or 2 doors fridge here, or 2 doors fridge, or 3 doors fridge, or 2 doors fridge, or wait, we got more. Oh, we got side-by-side fridge, or we got 6 doors multi-fridge. So there's 2 reasons why I'm showing this. One is a lot of people have been asking, how do you distinguish an epithet from a classifier? So the main thing is, of course, think about what it's doing. The main mantra, I should teach you linguistic meditation. You know, in Buddhist meditation, they teach you to ask you a question like, what is the sound of one hand clapping or something like that. In linguistic meditation, just keep asking yourself, what is the meaning? What is the meaning? So chant that as you're thinking. And then, so you think about what is the meaning of, you know, when you say like 2-door fridge or 3-door fridge, it's not really, you could say it's describing the refrigerator in a way, but it's more telling you what kind of refrigerator it is. as opposed to a blue refrigerator or a tall refrigerator or something like that. So each of these could be described as a tall six-door multi-door refrigerator, or a tall or short side-by-side refrigerator. But you couldn't reverse it. You couldn't say a side-by-side short refrigerator, because short refrigerator is not a type of refrigerator. A two-door refrigerator or side-by-side refrigerator is a type of refrigerator, so that you can tell right away it's a classifier. Now, can anybody tell me something about this when I talk about conventions that we do? Even though you can be creative, there are certain conventions that you really should follow. What's one that this is violating? Anybody? This is a mistake, or, this is a difference between local English here and American, British, Australian English. In American, British, and Standard English, American, British, and Australian English, you don't ever have plurals on the classifier. So if you say, like here, you'll often see 24 hours convenience store. We don't say that. We say 24-hour convenience store, or six-door refrigerator, or even six multi-door is a little bit weird, but six multi-door fridge, you could say that, but you would never have a plural, at least in American, British, and Australian English, you would never have a plural on the classifier. So that's something to keep in mind. But the thing is here, if we are accepting this as a variety of English, standard Singaporean English, this is something you see everywhere, and so, it's just part of the English here. It's just one of the conventions here. Okay. Oops. In the handout, I've given you an extra little bit on conjunction, talking about all the different kinds of conjunctive adjuncts that you can use. It's kind of as a way. Well, first of all, you can recognize them when they're used. I'm not going to go through this completely, but I'm just mentioning that I've given you this as a little extra help, so that when you're looking at them, first of all, when you see such a conjunctive adjunct, then you're going to be able to recognize what type of relationship the two clauses have. But also, one of the things you can do, again, always thinking about the meaning. That's our mantra. Think about the meaning. What is the meaning? When you're looking at it, what you can do is try the different kind of conjunctions. So if you see something like "we have no money, we can't go out," if you can stick in a conjunctive adjunct like "we have no money, so we can't go out," then you know right away what kind of relationship it is, right? So these can be used for both of those purposes, either in terms of identification of the relationship from when they do use it, and also you can try to stick them in yourself when it isn't used by the original writer. Okay. Okay. Whoops, wrong one. It's the wrong. This is the handout. Wait, I gotta close this. Okay. Oops, wrong one again. Let's see. Where is my, sorry. 6 should be here. Trans. That's Microsoft Word. Somehow my slides are missing. Wait. Damn. All right, wait. Hold on one second. I'll just have to print this as a... into PDF. it go? Yeah, where did that go now? Shit. All right, I'll just have to do it with this. All right, this one, we're just finishing up from last time, so I'm going to have to skip it. Somehow my slides have disappeared. This has full screen mode. Okay, with last time we talked about expansion, mainly, and we didn't talk about projection. And I left the projection part for today. Okay, so what we were talking about last time is when you had two clauses that were linked together in some type of relationship, either elaborating on the original, if you had first clause and second clause, one elaborating on the meaning of the other, another one extending the meaning of the other, or having some kind of circumstantial meaning related to the other. Another type, that's the enhancement type. With the another type, major type, is projection, where the two clauses are linked in a very different kind of relationship, where one is said to project the other. And so what that means is the clause that is projected functions not as a direct representation of experience. In other words, it's not saying like, he's coming today, but is a representation of what somebody said or thought. So it's kind of, as Halliday says, it's twice cooked. So it's somebody thought it, and then we're talking about what somebody thought, or somebody said it, and we're talking about what somebody said. So it's kind of double done. And so it's a projection is a representation of a representation. So when you speak or when you think of something, you're representing some state of affairs. So that's what we normally talked about, like when we talked about, almost everything up till now. But when you are talking about what somebody said, when they said it, they represented some state of affairs. And when you represent what they represented, then you kind of, that's why I said it's like double cooked. So it's a representation of a representation. And there are two types that we're talking about based on whether it's spoken or thought. So you have a locution, which is what somebody said, or you have an idea, what someone has thought. And each of them can be directly quoted or reported. In other words, you can say exactly what the person said, supposedly, or just report the basic meaning of what the person said. We call it indirect quote. And it could be a statement, a question, an offer, or a command. And there's a summary of this in the book on table 711. I'm not going to go into it. So what we're going to be marking in a locution, if it's a direct quote, we're going to assume if it's a direct quote, it's going to be a paratactic relationship. So we use this one and then double quotes two. If it's an indirect quote, then it's going to be the alpha double quote beta. And so when the relationship between the projecting and the projected clauses is paratactic, the projected clause is a direct quote. That is, it's a construction of wording, the actual words somebody said. So that's what we mean by a direct quote, is that it isn't always exactly what the person said, but it's meant to represent exactly what the person said. So when you say, please don't leave here, he said, this is supposedly the words that the person said, and you're just representing this person's speech. Not the idea, but the actual words themselves. Or frankly, Scarlett, he said, I don't give a damn. Or he yelled, sit down. Or he's not legally present, pointed out the lawyer. So in each of these cases, the reason why these are paratactic, now originally I said paratactic means that two clauses could stand by themselves. In this case, he yelled. I suppose you could say it by itself, or pointed out the lawyer. It was kind of more weird to stay by itself, or just he said is weird by itself. But the point is, the the kind of logical relationship between the two, it's not that one is modifying the other, and so that's why it's considered paratactic. So this is a little bit of an exception to the idea that when in paratactic juncture, the two clauses can stand together, stand independently. Now, when it's a hypotactic relationship, or we could turn it the other way around, when it's indirect speech or an indirect quote, then it's going to be hypotactic. And so it's not the actual words that someone said, but the meaning of it. And so that's why we call it an idea rather than the locution. Locution, locus means words. So locution means what you actually say. And the idea is what you think, right? So in this case, it's what the meaning of what the person said. And so it's, you know, somebody said, oh, please sit down. And then you say, well, he said sit down. But in that case, the sit down isn't a direct quote. It's just representing his wording as meaning. So when you say, he asked that I not leave here, the actual words he would have said was, don't leave here. But I would report that in this case as he asked that I not leave here. And she requested that everyone refrain from smoking would be the same analysis. So she requested, and then that everyone refrain from smoking. She probably said, okay, nobody should smoke here, or she could have said many different things. But the idea, the meaning that she expressed was that people should refrain from smoking. And so that's the way we're representing it. Or the lawyer pointed out that he was not legally present. Here, you know, the same idea that we had before, but done as an indirect quote. So it's not the actual wording, but the basic idea of what the person said. Or Susan demanded that I get out of her house. Of course, she probably just said, if she demanded it, she probably said, get the hell out of here. But in this case, he said, well, Susan demanded that I get out of her house. So she said very strongly that I could get out of her house. And so this is an indirect quote of, you know, her probably yelling at him, get out of here. The little boy said he was not one of those who wanted to go. So again, he said, I don't want to go. Maybe he said, I don't want to go, but then they reported it this way. Or the banker boasted that he was a wealthy man. You know, he could have said that in many different ways. She offered to buy me lunch. Again, you can offer somebody in many different ways to buy them lunch, but the idea is that you can express the meaning in this way. And all of these would be analyzed in the same way, just alpha and then double quote beta. And double quote because it's what somebody said. And now when it's an idea, we use a single quote. So with the single quote mark, this is just a convention we're using to distinguish between what somebody thought and what somebody said. And so this is a direct or indirect quote of somebody's thought or other mental process. So in this case, you can also have paratactic or hypotactic relationships between the two. So if it's kind of like a direct quote, then we consider that paratactic, like, I'd better get out of here, thought Bill. And again, this is not, you know, as Halliday talks about in the book, he takes it through like a historical development of how these came to be. You don't have to worry too much about that historical development, but his point is just that originally we didn't quote thoughts, we only reported thoughts. And we quoted words and reported thoughts, and then later on the two empty boxes got filled out so that we now quote thoughts and report ideas, report words, I mean. So, you know, I'd better get out of here, thought Bill, or I thought, why not get two of them? Or should I have taken the other road, he wondered. So this is not something actually said, although structurally it looks exactly the same. And so that's kind of the point of it, that we treat it the same structurally, but we're just marking it with the single quote rather than a double quote to show that it's what somebody thought. And so that's what paratactic. When it's hypotactic, the projected clause is treated like an indirect quote. So Sally thought she would like a piece of cake. Anita Page always believed she was the greatest film star. I originally thought I would go back the next day. So it's the same thing. She was the greatest film star. I would go back the next day. She would like a piece of cake. All of these are projected thoughts of these, either myself or Anita Page. And the analysis is the same for all of these, just alpha and then single quote beta. Now, just as with the enhanced type, you can have embedded locutions and ideas. So these are similar to the other kind of embedded clauses we talked about, except that in these cases, these are sometimes talked about in general typology, linguistic typology, as noun complements, because the head noun is a verbal process noun for things like statement, the statement that he is not coming, or the rumor that he's not coming, or the claim that he's not coming, or the assertion that he's not coming. It's different from, say, like the car that he came in, because it's just a process noun. In other words, it's representing the kind of locution. So is it a statement? Is it a rumor? Is it a claim? Is it an assertion? So what kind of locution it is. Or with mental process nouns like thought, you know, the belief that everyone should make $1 million, or the knowledge that everyone will never make $1 million, or the notion that everybody could make $1 million. So those are all mental process nouns. So in other words, they represent, you know, like a mental process verb, but treated here as a noun. And the difference between these and the normal enhancing type of embedded things is that with the defining relatives, you know, the ones that help you to identify the referent, so something like, you know, the car that I drove in, or the classroom that we're teaching in, or whatever, any kind of thing like that, there the head is the head noun, the thing you're talking about, like the car, is absolutely necessary. Where in this case, these things are not necessary. So the idea that man evolved from apes was hard to accept. You can drop that. You can just say that man evolved from apes was hard to accept. Or the argument whether he will go or not raged on for hours. So, you know, whether he will go on or not raged on for hours. It's a lot clearer when you add these, and so we often do. But in many cases, especially if it's something like the fact that he's not coming really annoyed us, you could just say, well, that he's not coming really annoyed us. So that's one big grammatical difference between this type, the projecting type, and the other type, where the head noun can be dropped in most of these cases. Not everyone, but a lot of them, it can be dropped. And so the difference also in the terms of the meaning is that in the defining relative, we're trying to identify what the head is. So if I put, you know, stop that. So if I have the man who came in, I'm trying to figure out who this man is, or I'm trying to tell you who this man is. And so this part is helping you to identify this man. And that's the only thing it's doing, is helping you to identify the man, because that's what my goal is to get you to understand who the man is. But in this case, it's not like that at all. This is really a characterization of this. So that man evolved from apes is really what I'm trying to get across. It's not the head noun is not the important thing. And what this head noun in these kind of projected types is a characterization. So that man evolved from an apes is a type of idea. Or whether he will go or not is a type of argument. So the head noun in these cases, the one that's being modified, is just a characterization of the thing that's in the embedded clause, which is very different from here, where it's the embedded clause that characterizes the head rather than the other way around. So in terms of function and structure, they're different. They look really similar, you know, the man who came in versus the idea that man evolved from apes. They look very similar, but actually they work quite differently. And it goes back to this difference between projection and enhancement. So you can see that it is important to distinguish these two. the desire to make a lot of money. So characterizing, in this case, making a lot of money as a kind of desire. Or I told him about the order to demobilize the men. So, demobilize the men is an order that was given. His belief that little green men will visit us in the near future is really crazy. So you're characterizing that little green men will visit us in the near future is a kind of belief. And that the proposition that all men are created equal is not universally accepted. We're characterizing that all men are created equally as a proposition. Is that clear? Can you see the difference between the two? So like the car I drove in, drove here, or the table in this that they put in this room, or the classroom in which we are teaching, those are all of a different type from this, where it's the embedded clause that characterizes the head rather than the head characterizing the embedded clause. Okay. And I mentioned in the handout the work through the examples on page 273. Halliday gives some very good examples. And think about why the analysis is the way it is. Again, I saw a great T-shirt today when I was going to buy my lunch where it said, question the answers. So it's one thing to answer the questions, but you should really question the answers. So even if the book has these answers in there, think through them and think, why do they say it that way? And also see whether it's right or wrong. There's sometimes typos or sometimes mistakes. And so always question the answers. Never accept things on face value. Even what I say. No, always take what I take as truth. Okay, any questions? Oh, I shouldn't have closed that. Any questions about projection? You gotta erase this. I don't know what they do this. Today when I came in, this thing was not only twisted up, it was wrapped around the chair. It's like the guy was sitting in the chair and spinning. Seriously, I had to spend a long time unwrapping it from the chair. I don't know what these people do with this. Okay, so what we talked about last week was combining clauses, the clause complexes. Please put your phones away. I don't mention it every time, but please do put your phones away and your computers away. So last time we talked about how we can link clauses together in different ways, either as elaborating or extending or enhancing. Enhancing. So some kind of circumstantial meaning. So in this case, we can do the same thing with groups and phrases as well. And so it's basically the same concept that we did last time, the same ideas. So you can have, like, with nominal group and nominal group, if you say, like, mad dogs and Englishmen, there's a famous poem where it says, only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the noonday sun, or the midday sun. Only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. Or butter and eggs, or these 5 rings plus the blue diamond. So it doesn't always have to be and. In this case, linking these two together, in this case you're just having this extension, so mad dogs plus Englishmen, or butter plus eggs, or these 5 rings plus the blue diamond. So this would just be 1 plus 2, just like we did with the extending. And then you have adjective with adjective. Now, some people asked about the idea that Halliday considers adjectives in English to be a kind of noun. He gives us at the end of, I think, chapter 5. And that's traditionally what we think about in English. It's different from every language. First of all, not every language has a class of adjectives. Grammatically, doesn't have a class of adjectives. And in those languages that have adjectives, in some languages they pattern like nouns. In some languages they pattern like verbs. And in some languages they have both types, like Japanese. They have verb type adjectives and noun type adjectives. So it's all up to the language how they do it. Now, English adjectives are actually distinct from both nouns and verbs, but they're more like nouns than they are verbs. And so he considers them a type of nominal or noun-like type of thing. So it's not a noun per se, but it's a nominal. In other words, it patterns very much like a noun. And you can put them together. The key with a lot of these things when you put them together is not so much what the form class is, but what the function is, because you join things together in terms of their function. Like with safe and sound, they're both kind of manner type of adjectives, or in this case, you could do it. He arrived safe and sound. We could use it as an attribute, or last but not least, or the lovely and talented Miss Wang. So lovely and talented, again, it's just 1 plus 2, but in this case, it's adjectives rather than nouns. So it's basically the same kind of idea we saw with the clauses, but we're doing it with group complexes, or just individual words. So you can have verbal group with verbal group, like I tried but failed. I neither like nor dislike. I started to work. And with the verbal groups, they represent a single process. With a normal, if you have a single verbal group, it represents one process with one event normally. So like to turn on the pointer is a single event. But a verbal group complex, when you put more than them together, represents still a single process with 2 or more events, whereas a clause complex represents 2 processes. So again, whenever you're trying to decide between a group complex, a verb group complex, and 2 clauses, and this is going to come up in your tutorials, think about the meaning. Again, our mantra, think about the meaning. What is the meaning? If the meaning is kind of 2 parts of one process, 2 events as part of one process, like to start to eat, right? It's not like you start and then you eat. It's you start to eat is really one process, but it's like 2 aspects of that same process. So that's going to be a group complex. But if you have 2 different events, then it's going 2 different processes, then it's going to be clausal juncture. And so the speaker will have a choice of how to represent the same situation. You can represent it as one event, like overloading blew the fuse, or as one process with 2 events, like overloading caused the fuse to blow, which you might say means the same thing, but you're representing it as 2 events as part of a clause complex, or as a hypotactic clause nexus. Because the fuse was overloaded, it blew. So there you have 2 clauses linked in a hypotactic nexus. Or you could have a paratactic clause nexus, as the fuse was since the fuse was overloaded, so it blew, or just the fuse was overloaded, so it blew. So again, it's about choices. So you have all of these choices when you represent the meaning. This is all supposedly kind of similar meaning. But how much emphasis do you want to give to the overloading and the blowing of the fuse, or do you want to focus on the overloading as it caused the fuse to blow, or you have these other options where like overloading blew the fuse, where you kind of just not emphasizing either one of those 2 other aspects, just putting it into one event. So there's always choices in doing this. And you can have adverbial group with adverbial group, like slowly but surely. He walked his way slowly but surely across the stream. He did it quickly and quietly, or intentionally and methodically. And as I mentioned, you can also join groups together that are of different types, but as long as they have the same function. And so you have a preposition phrase with an adverbial group when they both have some kind of circumstantial meaning, like quickly and without a sound. So he ran quickly and without a sound through the room. He did it carelessly without a thought, or it was done well and in no time. So the reason why, this is a preposition phrase and this is an adverb, And the reason why you can put them together is because they both have the same kind of circumstantial meaning, this manner type circumstantial meaning. Now, sometimes when you link things together, I don't know if you know Alanis Morissette, but she has a song where she says, he held the door and his breath for me. Now, that's weird. But of course, she can do that if she wants, because normally that's not the kind of thing, you don't hold the door and your breath, it's not like two things that should be linked together in that way. He held the door and his breath for me. Sometimes, people will put things together that aren't really doing the same function, and so then it seems funny. And she did that for a purpose, of course, to kind of, shake people up a little bit, and it is effective. But it's not something you would use normally. But it just shows you when you see something like that, it makes you think about, okay, why is that weird? And it's, because there are different kinds of things that you're putting together. And you can also have nominal group with preposition phrase if they both have an attribute function. So like, I want do you want your coffee plain or with cream? I want the cake whatever, thick and without the fat, or the meat thick and without the fat. He was calm but not in a good mood. So again, you have the preposition phrases and in this case nouns, but the reason why you can put them together is because they both have this attributive function. So, it's either plain or it's with cream, because with cream is an attribute that you can say about, say, coffee or something. Now, paratactically related groups and phrases can be linked by apposition, which is just elaborating, or by coordination, which is extending. Most of the ones we've looked at so far have kind of been extending. But you can have this elaborating type, like he was injured, knocked unconscious, where the knocked unconscious is just elaborating a little bit on what kind of injury, it was. So he was injured, he was knocked unconscious by the pole. So in this case, we say apposition is kind of when you're saying the same thing twice. So you say like, us Singaporeans, us and Singaporeans there, it means the same thing. And so we talk, that's in apposition. They're opposed to each other. Not opposed, but apposed. There's a difference between opposed and apposed. I don't know if you hear the difference in the vowel, but so in this case is kind of like that. Or she was killed, run over by a truck. So these are really saying the same thing. You get run over, you die. You get killed, you die. So it's kind of the same thing. And then he was one of the trolls, people who live in trees. So in this case, just kind of explaining, people live in trees is just another name for trolls, or an explanation of what the trolls are. They are linemen, the ones who fix the telephone poles. Again, just elaborating on what does it mean. What does it mean when you say a lineman? It means those who fix the telephone poles. Or he did it silently without a sound. So here you have the adverbial and a preposition phrase, what we mentioned earlier. So silently and without a sound, it's not two different things. It's one thing we're talking about. And we're just kind of, just for emphasis, right? Because silently and without a sound is saying the same thing twice. So it sounds quite redundant. But we very often do that just for emphasis. Or he did it alone without help. Again, if you did it alone, then you did it without help. But you can add that just for emphasis on how much you were alone. So that's why it's an equal type. I don't like it or dislike it. In this case, you have two different options. You're saying two different things, and so it's the extending type, the plus coordination. Oh no, I'm working with this one now. Everyone was pushing and shoving, so this is now seen as two different things, even though pushing and shoving are kind of similar. But because they have the and there, you are saying this and this. So pushing plus shoving, so then we use the plus sign. Mad dogs and Englishmen, so that's the plus again. The men, but not the women, so here you have the negative, but it's the same idea. In this case, you're contrasting, but it's this, but not this. Quickly and without a sound. This is two different things. So this is different from silently and without a sound, because silently without a sound, you're saying the same thing twice. Quickly and without a sound, you're saying two different things. So this one is 1 plus 2. The work was done well and in no time. Again, it's well and in no time is two different things you're saying. It's not the same thing, so it's 1 plus 2. Any questions so far on this in the first two types? So yeah. So if we have silently without a sound is the same meaning, just saying the same thing in two different words, two different phrases. But you can do that for emphasis, and so that's an equal type. But that's different from quickly and without a sound, where you have two different meanings. Right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, now the enhancing type is the circumstantial type of meaning. And it's usually with these types either temporal or a causal relationship. So like your cousins and then later your uncles came over yesterday. So if you just said your cousins and your uncles came over, that would just be extension. But because we have the later in there, so your cousins and then later, so then later adds the temporal meaning that they didn't come together at the same time. One came first, one came the other. So you've added this circumstantial meaning. So this one is the X2 type. She took it calmly enough, although not with without some persuasion. So you're saying she did this, although that. So there's this contrastive type of thing, like a concessive, almost like a concessive clause juncture. But in this case, it's not a clause. It's just a preposition phrase, and helping to give this concessive meaning to calmly enough. And he tried but failed to extract the poison. So in this case, you have this concession again. Although he tried, he failed. So the but here is kind of like saying, he tried to do it, although he failed, or but he failed. So, but in this case, rather than having it as two clauses, he tried to do it, but he failed, you can run this together as one verbal group complex and just say he tried but failed. So historically, I mean, these things would have come from full clauses, and it's just the more often we do a particular pattern, the more it gets condensed. And sometimes it over time you don't even see where it came from, like the word goodbye, right? Goodbye comes from God be with ye. And it just, people said it so often, so fast, that it just, God be with you, you got to be with the guy, bye, bye. It just gets reduced and reduced. And so this is what happens in language over time, is that things that we do often, there's a saying in linguistics that languages do best what they do most. So anything that we repeat often enough will get shortened. So like in Australia, if you're like radio DJs, if they're reading off a web address, they're giving you a web address on the radio. They don't say www dot. They say www. Because everybody knows what it's okay. You don't need the www. You can just say www, and then everyone understands what it's about. So anything that's predictable, anything that's done often, will get shortened, will get simplified, and so that's what happened here. So instead of saying, he tried to do it, but he failed in the end, you can just run those together into a single verb complex. And so that's basically where these things come from. I mean, you can still do it the long way if you want, but you can also do it in the short way. And then you can also have paratactic relationships within a single group, like 2 or 3 bananas, where the bananas is the thing, and then you have your numerative, and then you can have a paratactic relationship within the numerative, or within the epithet, bigger and better cars, or either we will or we won't win, or a clean and well-lighted place, again here with the epithets, having a paratactic relationship within there. So here you have the thing, and then you have 2 modifiers, but within this overall modifier, you have this paratactic relationship. This is from Hemingway, by the way. It's a very nice short story called A Clean and Well-Lighted Place. Do you ever feel like reading a Hemingway story? You should start with that one. Okay, so hypotactic relationships are again, hypotactic is always where you have one thing modifying another. And it's the same with groups and phrases. So similar to the modification of a head noun by an embedded relative clause or a hypotactically related clause, it's possible to have either an embedded or a hypotactically related preposition phrase as a post modifier. And as with the hypotactic clauses, the hypotactically related clause cannot stand alone to represent the group as a whole, whereas the dominant group can. So my new hat with the feather in it, so this one is elaborating on the new hat. Now this is different from my hat with the feather in it. So this would be the restrictive relative clause, the defining type relative clause, where it's telling you which hat. So if I tell you to go in and get the hat with the feather in it, then this helps you to identify which hat. Whereas if I say my new hat, the one with the feather in it, this is not really so much helping you to identify this, it's just elaborating on the hat. So it's like a non-defining relative clause. It's just parallel to a non-defining relative clause. Someone also asked, one of the questions that came up in the things you've been giving me, about why does an interpersonal epithet, why isn't an interpersonal epithet defining? Why can't it be used in a defining way? Right, so we can say, give me the blue, if I send you to go to my room, and I say, bring me the blue pen that's lying on my desk, right? But, so the difference between a kind of normal epithet or a real world kind of meaning type epithet and an interpersonal epithet is that it's some characteristic that you can use for identifying. It's a more objective rather than subjective thing. So anybody, if I tell anybody, go into my room and get the blue pen or get the blue jacket or the blue whatever, then they can identify it by the color blue. But if I say, go in my room and get the awesome jacket, or get the, that wonderful pen, they're not going to be able to find it unless they have exactly the same taste that I have, so they know what I think is awesome or they know what I think is wonderful. So that's the difference. One is just your personal subjective kind of evaluation of it, and the other one is some more objective characteristic that can be used to find the thing by somebody who doesn't necessarily know what it is. Oops. Okay, so with these, like the new hat with the feather in it, this is just elaborating on that a bit. My hat with the feather in it is different because it's helping to define it. The new building across from the park, in this case, again, it's just elaborating on which new building, or from now until then. Now this one, I don't understand why he does this as elaboration, but we have to go with it. This is what he says. Because for me, this is almost like two things. From now till then, it's like it should be more like extending, but he considers this elaboration. I have to ask him sometime why he did that. So he sees this as this one just elaborating on from now. So until then, I guess the idea is like when you say from now, that's open-ended, and then so I could be from now, but then I clarify what I mean from now until then. So I guess it means something like that. So it just kind of helps to clarify how far from now, or from here to there, right? So if I walk from here, I could walk and walk and walk. But then if I want to clarify how far I'm going to walk, then I say, well, I'm going to walk from here to there. So I guess that's the idea behind it. The car as well as the bike. So here you have the extending type, addition. The car instead of the bike, you have extending again, but variation or replacement. This guy, unlike me, again, is extending, but variation or replacement. On time instead of 2 hours. I want you to be here on time instead of 2 hours late. It's again extending with variation or replacement. All of them, except for me, where here's this variation of the subtraction type. Even though we use the plus sign, it's kind of a subtraction. Or face-to-face rather than on the phone. Now this is different. Halliday mentions in the book to be careful between, to looking at face-to-face rather than on the phone, or you know, these other types. And between the door and the window, which is one preposition phrase, and in the paratactic relationship is just within here. So this is, you know, 1 plus 2, and that's the complement of this preposition. So when you look at these, make sure it's not, you're not saying this is between the door as one part of this linking. The linking is just the door and the window, and then both of those together are the complement of between. Upstairs and to the left of the landing is a narrowing. So this one is enhancement because you're kind of narrowing the scope of what you mean by upstairs. Tomorrow, before lunch, again, you're kind of narrowing the scope of what you mean by tomorrow. So this is a very common thing we would do. We would start with a more general time or place and then narrow it down by using this enhancing type of thing. And if we look at the difference between the order of elements in hypotaxis as opposed to embedding, it's kind of the opposite. So with a hypotaxic thing, you start with the big one and you move to the little one. So it's upstairs to the left of the landing, in the main bedroom, against the far wall, in the small cupboard, in the top drawer, in the back right corner. Whereas you could say the same thing embedding, but you would start in the right-hand back corner of the top drawer, in the small cupboard, against the wall, in the main bedroom, to the left of the landing, upstairs. And you'll notice, what does this remind you of? Those of you who know Chinese. This is how you write a Chinese address. This is how you write a Western address, right? So it's this difference of whether you start big and go small or you start small and go big. You know, languages are free, or writers are free to do it either way. Okay, let's take a break first, and then we'll come back and talk about hypotaxis in the verbal group. We actually don't have that much to go, do we? Oh, right. Yeah, okay, there's a mistake. Yeah. All right. Sorry, we just found a mistake there. We didn't want to swap the screen. This should be an X. Yeah, this should be an X. Well, no, it's not the same thing. So upstairs is the order I forgot to mention the song that I played earlier. I don't know if anybody wants to hear it again, but that was written in 1944, and the title, I don't know if you got to hear, the title is You Is or Is You Ain't My Baby? Just to show you how people can play with language. Okay, let's get back into it. Now, hypotaxis in a verbal group, if you read traditional grammars and the way Halliday analyzed it's a little bit different. This is when you have these two verbs together in a verbal group complex. This is normally what's talked about as an auxiliary verb plus a main verb. But in this theory, it's actually seen the other way around. Because the first verb is when you have something like stop thinking about it, the first verb is the one that actually gets the tense and the mood marking, whereas the second one is considered, which is traditionally considered the main verb, but it's considered in this theory as a modifier of the first one. So that's why it's alpha and then beta for what you might think of as the main verb here. And so this verb can be finite or non-finite, whereas this one is always non-finite. And so that's part of the kind of clue that it's not the main thing that's going on there. And when you do this, the modifier is this thing that comes last, and it's the modifier of this first part. And it can only be non-finite, and the two of them together form a single process, a single happening. So like I was saying, when you begin, like I began to cut the bread, or I begin cutting the bread, it's not like I begin and then I cut the bread. It's all one process, so there can only be one tense in those cases. And it's always going to be alpha, beta, in this order, so depending on how many you have. So she stopped thinking about it, so the main verb would be stopped, and then the thing that she stopped is the thinking about it, so you're elaborating on the time phrase by using the word stopped. She seemed to get smaller and smaller. This is an elaborating type, talking about the reality. We're going to be talking a little bit about reality phase. It means like whether you started, stop it, or whether it's really happening or not happening. Could people put away their phones? Hello, hello. Could you put away your phones? Thanks. And then, so we're going to be talking about reality phase is whether it's really happening or not happening, and then also in the case of like seem, you know, if it seems to be happening. So seem to get smaller, smaller and smaller, or I began to cut the bread, so then it's time phase, you know, the phase whether you're starting or stopping. He tried to reach the other side, so in this case it's extending, so he tried to get to this place. He managed to get free is again extending. He managed to do something, what, to get free. He learned to do something, to speak French. She stopped to think for a while. Now this case is a special case I'll come back to in a minute, but this one is considered an extending case of cause of purpose. He tends to talk a lot, where in this case you have this temporal thing, means like he often talks a lot. She forgot to bring the keys. The reason why she doesn't have it is forgetting. She helped to set up the table. There's this helped is a sense of you did it with other people. Now this is a difference between, again, Singapore English and American and Australian and British English. In American and British English, if I say, I'll help you do it, or you come and ask me, could you help me do this, that means we do it together. So that's why this is considered accompaniment. In Singapore English, it doesn't mean we do it together. So my secretary will come to me is, can you help me sign this? And that doesn't mean that we're going to sit down together and sign it. It means I'm going to sign it, and that's going to help her. That's a very different meaning. So there are all of these really subtle but interesting differences between Singapore English and you know, other varieties of English. So that's why this can be considered an accompaniment type, because in American English and British English, it always means that you do it together. So as accompaniment. He began to do the homework. He began to try to do the homework. So you can have three elements involved here, where this one's still the main verb, and these two are different types of modifiers. So the to try is the elaborating type, and then the try to do, the to do, I mean, is the, it should be over here, sorry. The to do is the extending type. So you can have a number of these, and the interesting thing about this, again, speaking historically, is that this is also where we get these extra tenses that we talked about. You know, so when you say he must have been doing it, the have been would originally been a verbal complex like this, but over time just ends up getting reanalyzed. Another thing that happens very often in languages, things kind of change. What we call reanalyze means they were originally thought of in one way and they get thought of in a different way. So the had been gets reanalyzed just as a type of tense marking. Whereas originally it just began in, you know, when it was originally used, it was just this kind of verbal complex. Now, an interesting thing that we find in English that very few theories talk about, although it's really an important aspect of understanding why people write the way they write, is that there's a distinction within the non-finite forms of English between the so-called imperfective or realis and perfective or irrealis forms. So the one is marked by ing, that's the imperfective form, and the perfective form is either marked by to, like to reach, or just reach by itself. Now, when I say it's perfective or imperfective or realis or irrealis, imperfective and perfective are kinds of aspect normally, we talk about it. And what that means is you're looking at the internal structure of, the internal temporal structure of an event. That's imperfective. Whereas perfective means you're looking at the event as a whole, not completed, but as a whole. So you're not looking at the internal structure. And realis versus irrealis, realis just means it's real, okay, so it's actually happening. And irrealis means it's not happening, so it's not real. In some languages, this is an important category. Like in Tagalog, you mark things, they don't have past, present, and future. They just have realis or irrealis. So If something is happening, then you mark it realis. Whether it's happened in the past or happened now, it's still realis. And if it hasn't happened yet, then it's irrealis. So in English, we have the same thing, although not many people talk about this. And you can see the difference in meaning when you say something like reaching the monument, continue straight ahead, versus to reach the monument, continue straight ahead. So reaching the monument is like, you know, you're walking up towards the monument, and then reaching there means, okay, when you have gotten to the monument, or after you've gotten to the monument, continue straight ahead. But to reach the monument means you haven't gotten there yet, and you want to get there, and so you should continue straight ahead in order to get there. So the meaning of these two is quite different. And the only difference is whether you use the ing form or the to form here. And yet the meaning is really quite different. And the types of meanings, it's not all just one type of meaning. So like the difference between try to relax versus try relaxing. This is the goal, try to relax, so your goal is relax. Whereas try relaxing, it means, you know, use relaxing as a means to do something else. Or it turns out to know, he turns out to know all about it, versus he turns out knowing all about it, is the difference is so-called appearance leading to realization or realization following appearance. So again, there's a difference in whether it's already happened or not happened. And then starts to win versus ends up winning. So if we were talking about before or while a race is still going on, but you know the person hasn't won yet, then you would say, you know, he's going to win. But if he's already winning, then you say he's winning, right? So there's a difference between the so-called the perfective and the imperfective form. So you wouldn't say he ends up to win. You can't say that because he's already won. So you have to use winning, or he ends up winning. Or begins to work, or keeps working. So you can use either one. You can say begins working. Begins to work means you really have, like if I begin to cut the bread versus I begin cutting the bread, at least for me, there's a difference in the sense. So if I say begin to cut the bread, my knife may not have touched the bread yet. But if I begin cutting the bread, then the knife is already in the bread. Did everybody feel that? Yeah. I get this, yeah, maybe, whatever. So begins to or keeps working, definitely. You can't say keep to working, because keep to work. You can't say keep to work. You have to say keeps working with the ing form, because if you keep doing it, then obviously you're already doing it, so you have to use the ing form. Or decide to write means you haven't started writing yet. You begin writing, that means you've already got pen on paper or fingers on computer, and you already started the writing. You could also say begin to write, where you haven't yet started, you know, the actual writing possibly. Now, I was in Bukit Batok Nature Park on Sunday, just this past Sunday, walking, and I saw this "Stop feeding the monkeys." You know, it's really in your face, huge, huge billboard. And the thing that's interesting about it is the first time I ever went to Bukit Batok Nature Park, and I'd never fed any monkeys, and yet they're blaming me or saying that I'm feeding monkeys. And the reason for that is because of this ing form. It means you're already doing it. And I'm not doing it, so I was angry. I said, I'm not feeding the monkeys, so don't say I'm feeding the monkeys. And so, you know, so here it's the same thing. It's verbal complex where you stop feeding the monkeys. And notice the difference in meaning when you say stop to feed the monkeys. If you stop to feed the monkeys, then you're going to do the opposite of stop feeding the monkeys. You're going to stop, and then you're going to feed the monkeys. Because here, this is understood as kind of the purpose of why you're stopping, whereas this is what you are stopping. And this is a change. Halliday actually talks about this in one part of the chapter, where he talks about that. This is actually changed into more of a clause complex, because it's actually now become kind of two processes, to stop and then to feed the monkeys. So he's arguing that this is one where there's been a change from a verbal complex, where it used to be the same, like, you know, stop feeding would be the same as like begin feeding and begin to feed. where they really it's still the same, like one process, and it's just a matter of whether it started or not. But stop feeding versus stop to feed, then with stop to feed, you really have two processes happening. So this has changed a little bit. But you can see how different the meaning is between stop feeding the monkeys and stop to feed the monkeys. And here the Chinese kind of reflects the English, but there's another version of it where they're a little bit more polite in Chinese, where they say, just don't feed the monkeys. But they say in English again, stop feeding the monkeys. Kind of blurry, but because I had to blow it up for the slide. But anyway, you can see how important this distinction between the ing form and the to form is. So it's something you need to pay attention to when you're writing or reading. Is everybody clear about that before we move on? Because that's a kind of complicated thing, and most speakers will have a sense of it, but they have no real awareness of it, and so they, you know, when you're writing or reading, you may not really catch it. Any comments, questions? Okay, if there's passive, somebody asked me what a passive is. A passive is an alternative form of a verb where normally if you have a transitive verb like I ate the pizza. So if it's a transitive, we've got two arguments. Now, so this is what's called an active clause. And what a passive clause is, you get rid of the actor. So this one we call the actor, right? And this is the goal. So in a passive, the actor gets either removed completely or ends up in a circumstantial phrase, a by phrase, and then the goal becomes a subject. So then it would be, you know, the pizza was eaten by me. Now notice this changes because it's no longer subject, so I becomes me. And did I steal this from here or is this mine? I don't know. I've been increasing my number of pens, so I think I'm stealing them from here. So this is what not what a pizza about. What a passive is about. So I ate the pizza. You could also say the pizza was eaten by me. So what this does in reality, because this by me isn't necessary, it's an intransitive clause. So there's only one argument: the pizza was eaten. So that's one of the big differences between the active and passive form. Is this is a transitive clause, this is an intransitive clause. But the reason for it is just when you want to make the goal the theme, an unmarked theme, right? So you use the passive to make the goal an unmarked theme. Okay. Any question about that? Okay, so in the passives, in this kind you can have passives as well, and the relationships generally stay the same. So the two guards happened to assist her, or she happened to be assisted by the two guards. So this is the passive one, this is the active one, and so it doesn't matter whether you know, you have the active or passive in the modifying clause, the relationship stays the same. Now, the other thing that we have to talk about is these causatives. They are another type of hypotactic structure, and the most common type of structure you find in languages cross-linguistically. And in it, they form two verbs. The two verbs form a single process, although they don't necessarily appear together. So this is a tricky bit about the causatives, is that sometimes you have something in between them, like he kept the ball rolling, where it's really keep rolling is one verb complex, but the thing that you keep rolling ends up in between the two parts of the verb complex. So here you're elaborating, it's the same thing as, you know, I kept rolling the ball, but in this case you can say I kept the ball rolling. To some extent it's governed by the same rules as what we talked about with the benefactive and these other type of thing, that the newer information comes at the end, or the most salient information comes at the end. So the difference between I kept rolling the ball, or John kept rolling the ball, or he kept the ball rolling, there's a little bit of a difference in meaning, but it's also a difference of kind of information structure to some extent. You know, what you're kind of emphasizing the most. John started the ball rolling. Now this one is interesting because it's actually now metaphorical, whereas if you say John started rolling the ball, it's not metaphorical. Then it's really, he really did roll the ball on the ground. But when you say he started the ball rolling, it could be that he's really rolling a ball on the ground, but in this case, it's more often used as a metaphor, just meaning he started things going, got things going. But it originally came, of course, from this idea of to start rolling something. John considers Bill to be irresponsible, where this is elaborating on what he's considering. John made him try to eat. In this case, you have the causative to try. Sorry, again, this is not lined up properly. So try to eat. You have two modifiers of the main verb. Or this enables the patient to see clearly, where you're enabling, in this case, extending the sense of the enabling to seeing. She taught him to speak French, where there's the teaching, and this teaching was of speaking French. And teaching, by the way, in English, again, we have often single words that include this sense of causativeness. So to teach means to cause somebody to learn something, right? Or it should be. A lot of times we teach, nobody learns anything. But it's supposed to be when you teach something that people learn it. Anyway. And in many languages, they don't have those kind of verbs. So you actually have to use multiple verbs. You have to use a kind of verb complex to say, like, cause to teach, cause to learn. Or in other languages, even a verb like show, they don't have a single verb like show. It's like cause to see, cause somebody to see something. So each language will differ in terms of which kinds of meanings it will put into one word or require two words. So like in Chinese, for example, you don't have a lot of these causative verbs, like if you want to say to kill somebody, normally you would say 杀死, which means like you'd use a two-part verb, which is like to do something with murderous intent and then it would die. So the person dies. Historically, it wasn't like that in Chinese, but now it is, where you usually use a two-part verb, like to break a cup. Like in English, we would say I broke the cup, but in Chinese, you would have to say hit, broke the cup, something like that. 打破了. So languages will differ in terms of whether they treat this causative sense as one word or as multiple words in a complex like this. So John made the ball roll. So in English, we have a choice between those two. So I could say John rolled the ball, or I could say John made the ball roll. So we have a choice between those two. John got them to accept our terms, where in this case it's just agency in the sense of, kind of made them accept our terms, or John reminded Bill to bring the key, caused him to bring the key. So these were all examples of expansion. Any questions up to this point? In projection, you can have those. So in the enhancement type, you only have one time reference, so it can only be one tense. In projection, it's possible, because it's the projecting clause and the projected clause are kind of different. It's possible to have two time references, like he wants to do it tomorrow, where the wants is present tense, but to do it tomorrow is a kind of future tense. And so the relationship between want and to do here is a projected relationship. So anything that's a mental process or a verbal process is going to be projecting. And to do is the meaning type. It doesn't imply, when you say wants to do it, it doesn't imply that he actually does it. Where if you say he began doing it, then it implies that he actually did it, or begins doing it, he's actually doing it. But when you say wants to do it, there's no implication that he's actually doing it. Unlike with expansions, which imply does it. Many projections can and should be analyzed as clause complexes, but some can be analyzed as group complexes. So like John wanted to bring the key. So in this case, we treat this as an idea, the single quote, idea, and as modifying this mental kind of process to want. And John wanted Bill to bring the key. So whether it's John who wants himself to bring the key or John wants Bill to bring the key, the analysis is the same. Now, a lot of grammatical theories will treat these two as very different, but this theory basically treats them as the same. Or John is going to bring the key, where this one is seen as a kind of intention. It's often talked about as prospective aspect in other theories, but it came from the idea of intention. So historically, it would have been, I'm going to see the king, for example, means you're actually physically going, and then you're going to see the king. And then later on, people started using, like, I'm going to eat now, where it just meant not I'm going to go somewhere and then eat, but I intend to eat. And so now it's just become kind of aspect marking, but the intention sense is still there. So that's why we call this intention marking. So intend to bring the key kind of thing. John expected Bill to bring the key. Again, it's a mental event of expecting. John asked Bill to bring the key. Here you have the locution type, demanding, so it's a proposal type, demanding that John bring the key, Bill bring the key. John promised Bill to bring the key, so here you have another type of locution, but in this case, the offer or promise. John pretended to bring the key, where again it's just pretending, and John professed to bring the key, where he claims to do something, make a strong statement, they make a claim to do something professed. And then I've given you this table. This is from a newer edition of the book, but I've given you this table on the other handout, the back of the other handout. So this has a little bit of a summary of the different, like the expansion versus projection, and then the different types of expansion. And then the Parataxis versus Hypotaxis, and then some examples of each type. So it's a nice little summary. Any questions? Yeah.
Sorry, for this one, John asked you, shouldn't the location be or the location?
This one?
Yeah.
John asked Bill to bring the key. I can't hear you. What? Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Very good. All right. Yes, so if it's a locution, it should be double, not if it's not an idea. Yeah, sorry, so it should be double quotes. Very good. A lot of times, you get into this copy, paste, and then you forget to change the things that are important. So, so when I was doing the idea, and then I switched the location, I forgot to change the quote from single to double. So, yeah, with the locution type, it should be double quotes. Sharp, that's good, extra points. Any other comments, questions, or corrections?
Why is pretended categorized under? I mean, to me, it's more of a physical thing.
Well, it's not something necessarily that he said, right? So locution is just something that the wording that somebody said. So he's conveying an idea that he. So the question was, how is pretend not a locution? Why is it an idea instead of a locution? That's your question, right? I guess just in the sense that it's trying to get, well, how would I explain this? So if you have, so he's saying why is this projection? So why is pretended projection? Because it's not like the normal type of projection where you're projecting an idea or projecting a locution. So in this case, the only thing I can say is that that when you pretend something, you're trying to convey an idea about something that's not real, right? So pretend is not something that's real situation. So it's almost like an idea. I'm trying to get across an idea. So if I pretend to do something, I want you to get the idea that I'm doing something, even if I'm not really doing it. That's the only thing. That's the only explanation I can give you. But yeah, I may be wrong.
Because just now you mentioned that for projection, they have to be mental or verbal processes.
Right.
But for me, pretend seems more to be like more on the material side than either or. Because I interpret it to be like physically acting as if you brought the key.
Usually people that you deal in this
Yeah.
because it can be something that's a lie. They're trying to give me the do I make sense? So he was asking like why is it an idea? Then to me personally is that even though he's physically pretending, he's trying to implant inception, right? He's trying to implant an idea of what he is not into your head. So at the end of it, he's still dealing with an idea, even though it's through a physical act. I'm not sure if I'm right.
Yeah, and he's not actually doing the material act. I mean, he's doing the material act of pretending, but not the actual act of bringing the key. I guess I have to think about where I got this example. If it's from Michael, then I can ask him about it. But if I made it up myself, then I may be wrong. So I'll have to check on that. Any other comments, questions, criticisms, corrections? We got a few more minutes. I'll see if I can answer some more questions. Following on from that question about epithets, why are they not potentially defining? They also asked, how do you distinguish between experiential and interpersonal epithets? And the idea is just that, again, it's whether it's some kind of objective quality or some just subjective personal evaluation. So something like awesome or beautiful or wonderful, I mean, that's going to be interpersonal. But something like blue or hard or something green, anything like that is going to be experiential. And then how do you define? Actually, with some of the examples we gave, it may depend on context whether something is the same word. Again, don't get caught up in words because go back to the meaning. Always, what is the meaning? Only. So like something like boiled egg may be a type of egg, right? As opposed to over easy or, if you're ordering in a restaurant, you might have several types of egg. You have fried egg, boiled egg, and whatever. But that may be different. That may be a classifier in that context, but boiled water is not what we normally think of as a type of water. So in that case, boiled may not be a classifier. In each context, you have to see whether it's part of a defining set. So normally with classifiers, there'll be a restricted set of options. So like with eggs, if you have a poached egg, a boiled egg, fried egg, those are your options there for types of egg. Or you say like convenience store versus department store versus what other kind of stores? Not too many. So very often with classifiers, it's a very limited set of things that can be used there. Whereas epithets, you can have all kinds of epithets. You could say big store, little store, green store, blue store. All kinds of different epithets can go in there. And then the same thing with the interpersonal ones. You could say wonderful store, crappy store. You know, it's open to whatever you want to put in there. Yeah. Traveling salesman is a traditional classifier thing because, but you wouldn't say flying salesman, or, you know, that's not, I mean, these are all conventionalized sets. So you can create new conventionalized sets, but generally these things are, you know, language, the whole thing is a convention. So there'll be certain things, and it's just, somehow there was a classification of some salesmen as traveling salesmen, and it doesn't really contrast with, I mean, we don't normally say an office salesman, but you might say a, what are the ones that call you up on the phone? Telemarketing salesman, you know, so you could have traveling salesman versus telemarketing salesman. You know, those kind of things. And it's all just, you know, depends on the conventions of the society. The Fifth Avenue train, yeah. So, like, well, like in New York, you know, you have a Fifth Avenue train, and you have the, you know, the First Avenue train, and you know, so it's helping you to identify which train. So that's not in the sense of a defining an epithet, but in the sense of the nature of the train. So in this train runs along Fifth Avenue as opposed to runs along First Avenue. So yeah, so within that context, those might be seen as classifiers. So that's why I was saying it all depends on the conventions of the society, what types of things they classify in a particular way. And so like with boiled egg, we see that as contrasting as a type with fried eggs and poached eggs, right? An omelet. Omelet doesn't fit, but it's a type of egg, something or other, right? So if you're on a menu, you would have a choice of those things. Or, you know, like different types of steak or something. You say like sirloin steak versus rump steak versus whatever. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't know lots of steaks. But, you know, you can have whatever it is. If you have subtypes of that thing, and that's really what the classifier is subtypes of the thing, which are standardized, conventionalized types within the society. Whereas the epithet is just something characteristic of the particular one you're looking at. It's not a type. It's the particular one you're looking at, in that sense. So, you know, the blue pen on my table, or the green book that I lent you, or something like that. Any other comments, questions? One of the questions that came up some time ago is distinguishing range from goal. So like the difference between they did the transfusion versus they transfused the blood. Can anybody explain that? They did the transfusion versus they transfused the blood. So I'm sure you're all thinking that they did the transfusion. Transfusion is what? Is that a goal or a range? Range, right, because it's just the name of the process. Whereas if they transfuse the blood, what is the blood? It's a goal. It's the thing that gets transfused, right? So it's really straightforward in that particular context. Just think the range is going to be either the name of the process, like sing a song or do the transfusion or play a game of tennis, where it's actually just another name for what you're doing, or it's going to be the place where you're doing it. So like climb a mountain or play a piano, or in some cases delimit the type, or either the type or extent of your action. So like not so much the extent, more the type. So like eating pizza, right, as opposed to eating seafood or eating chili crab, right? So what are we going to do today? Oh, we're going to eat chili crab. Or no, we're going to go eat pizza. Or we're going to go eat chicken rice, right? Those are different types of eating, right? They're not, it's not, you're not really talking about the chicken rice or the pizza or the whatever. If you say he ate the pizza that was in the refrigerator, then it's eat the pizza, then that's a goal. The pizza is a goal. But if you just say he ate pizza yesterday, then it's a range, right? It's very different because when you say he ate pizza, there's no specific pizza that you're talking about. All it's doing is saying what kind of eating you did. So that's the tricky examples. The what? Normally, if it has a range, it doesn't have a goal. It may be possible, but I couldn't think. Can anybody think of an example where you have a range and a goal in the same sentence? It's kind of difficult because the range takes the position that the goal would normally be in. So it would be hard to have both of them, you know. I can't think of any examples where you'd have both. Oh, and then also with going back one more time to this this kind of epithet versus classifier and things like that. This is a different person. Why is galloping in a galloping horse an epithet and not a classifier? Because galloping horse is not a type of horse. We don't say, you know, get me a galloping horse versus get me a walking horse. You know, you can say, get me a stallion or get me a mare or whatever. You know, those are types of horses. Or trotter, maybe even you could get. But galloping is something the horse is doing, right? So it's an individual horse galloping. And so a galloping horse, you're talking about some specific characteristic of that horse, not a general type of horse. What is the purpose of rank shifting? So we have these rank shifted types of things like when a clause acts as an argument of another clause, like when you say that George Bush is an idiot is obvious to everyone. So that one, what is the purpose of that? Well, it's just to take a large proposition and treat it as part of a larger proposition. So you have this, you know, one proposition that George Bush is an idiot, and you can rank shift it. If you treat it as a separate clause, then it can't act as an argument of another clause. But you can rank shift it and then treat it as an argument of another proposition. So you add it to is an idiot. So this thing is an idiot, and where this thing or this person, you say that this idea that George Bush is an idiot is obvious to everyone. So it allows you to join clauses together in a slightly different way. Rather than joining them paratactically or hypotactically, you're actually putting one inside the other. At least when it acts as an argument. In the other case, when it's a qualifier or a post-modifier of a noun, then instead of being a separate proposition on its own, as it would be if it was a normal clause, you're just using it to modify or identify the thing that you're talking about. So like the guy who just came in the door, the guy who just came in. So I want to identify the guy, and I can use the proposition that he came in the door as a way of identifying him. So that's the goal of rank shifting in that case. So in one case, it's just to become an argument of another clause, and the other case is to help identify a particular thing. Okay. Okay, I didn't bring all the others, so I guess that's all. Any other comments or questions? I have a lot of them. Each week I get 100 of these, and I try to select a few to respond to if I have time, but I forgot to bring another pile that I have. No more comments, questions? Everything is crystal clear? All right. Well, Amanda and Luke will clarify anything you don't get now. See you next week. So there were leftovers after all of that? That's a lot of leftovers.
But it's all three, so there are different ones.
No, it's all the same type. Yeah, groups and phrases. Oh, I see. There's some old ones. Some old ones. Okay.
Together, so it's easier.
All right. Thanks. Bye bye.